So, okay, guys, so we'll take 2 minutes to rewind back what you did last time and where this framework is actually at. So what we'll take a look at some of the packages we have, some of the feature files we have. So currently we just have one feature file. In this feature file, we'll tested 3 different scenarios, and all of them are related to login. So in case you want to always view where these steps are written, you can just go and see those steps, or you can navigate on your source codes and you can see the login steps here as well. So you did this last time. Also related to that, you must also be familiar with the utilities packages that we have. So basically everything will start in our base class. From base class, it will develop using the hooks. It will pick up whatever it's needed to load the driver information, the properties that we have selected or that we want to use. And then from there, it will reach the website. It will try to perform these steps in the turn that we have actually defined it here. All right, so that's general what we did. Also, now what we'll be doing today, we'll be doing another feature file. And what we aim to do is actually more like data-driven testing. So this is somehow, if you can think in terms of that, it's just some data-driven testing in the sense that we are actually providing some username, passwords, but we have them stored somewhere, and it's just like a set of properties, and that's why we are using the properties file to load it. But what if you have, like, if you think in terms of one time job in here, for example, you don't want to test, so here you test with valid login information, here you test with an empty password. Can you do all of these different types of testing in, let's say, one coding? So this is done by data-driven testing. So if you think in terms of this as in a one-time coding, is that you can say that we want to test with different data, and one time we supply or we provide some valid login data, another time we provide an empty password, and sometime a random login username and password. So all of those, we can do them using scenario outlines, okay? So initially, we'll just take a look at what do we want to do today. Let me share my, can you guys see my Chrome as well? Right, let me, oh, okay, I'm used to using Slack. Let me also keep the chat in here. All right, just in case we have any comments. So if I miss any comments from you guys, please let me know. All right. Okay, so this is the web page you actually worked last time as well. So what you did last time, you used these information here to just log in, also to perform some wrongful logins. So what we'll be doing here today is that now we want to go further, and we want to log into the application. All right, that's given for every scenario that we want to perform. We want to log in. All right, and we want to be able to select one of the items in here that we have. So we want to go and select one of the items in here, each one depending on what the data says. So basically, think of it in terms that the company is telling you that, look, we have all of these products, and we want you to test them all, whether they can be clicked on, added to cart, and then proceeding to the checkout. So basically, you'll have to test them, all of them. So if you think in terms of manual testing, somebody had to do that for each one of them one by one and perform it and keep documentation. Now, this is the thing with automation, that you don't need to actually do that one step by step and one by one, but you can actually make the computer do that. So what do we want to do? We want to select among these products one product, then we want to be able to say that we want to add this to our cart, and then we need to go to cart here, and we have this product in our cart. Then we want to check out, filling this information. Let's just put some void information. So filling this information, we want to be able to see our checkout overview. And also at this point, we want to make sure that we have this item here So basically, did the item pass from where it was selected to the checkout overview? And we want also to take a screenshot at this point. All right, is the scenario, or is it clear what we want to do? Now, where is the data-driven part of it? So the data-driven part of it is that we have some necessary data to perform this. We need some data, right? So first of all, we need all of these items. Instead of doing one by one, for example, like our employer might say that, okay, do these three first. So 1, 2, 3, or these three first. So probably we won't have them all. We want some of them. So we don't know what it is, but they are going to give us what to test. And after that, we also need to have, so if you see, if we want to check out, we actually need also to have some information. So this needs to be provided as well. So basically now, if you think in terms of what do we need, so we need an item and we need some information, checkout information each time that we perform one test, right? Each time that we do a checkout. So if we think in terms of 2 checkouts, 3 checkouts, or 6 checkouts, if we wanted to test all the elements in there, we will have a table, right, guys? Now, we have to think each step in terms of automating it. First of all, we want to be able to log in. And this feature doesn't have to be, let's say, a part of our scenario testing, but we just wanted to do every time for each scenario that we do it, right? So let's, first of all, create a feature file. So, and let's call this as checkout.feature. All right, so this is our documentation on it. Let's just keep an author as Neotech Academy.
Yeah,
Okay, now let's just also renew some tags here. Let's put it as checkout. We will need that later. So basically what this feature file show up to here is just some documentation, how we can use scenarios and how we can use scenario outlines as well. All right, now what do we want to do here? First of all, we want an operation here. Let's just put it as a comment, operation to log in every time for each scenario. Now, we have, as you have done earlier, in here you have tested login. So we are assuming that we are past that test. We have kept the information, we have proven everything in there, and we are not interested anymore in checking out those steps one by one, whether it's failing at this point or whether it's doing something that's supposed to do, right? So what do we need for it now? It is just a utility that we need so that we can go to checkout. We need first to log in, right? So what does that mean? We can actually configure that as a background operation, right? So what does this mean? It means that before every scenario that we have in here, first of all, it will perform the login. Is that clear, guys? So that's why we do it as a background. First, we don't want to test it. It's not our aim to test login, but it is an auxiliary action. So it's an action that we need to do so that we can proceed with the other steps that we have. So here, let's just say that we can put a step here that we can say that given user is successfully logged in. All right. So as you can see, again, if we save, we do not really have that step in there. All right. So we do not have that step in there. We don't have any of the steps in there yet. We are still with a documentation file. Now, what do we want to do here? We are actually, this is our previous form. If you see, this is what you did last time, just one scenario. And what that means is that each of these steps is going to be performed once, and then it's going to go to the next scenarios if you have any. If you don't have any, it's going to end here, and that's it. But what we want to do is that we want to use a scenario outline because we want to run the same test for multiple types of data, multiple different data. So the structure is going to be the same, but the descriptions of the data are different. So imagine, like, think back to what we said earlier here. Instead of doing these three, we can do one scenario outline, which has a set of data, always a user and password, but the username is, let's say in this case, they are both valid. In this case, the username is valid, but the password is empty. In this case, both of them are random. So now if we think back to that, we don't need this scenario at all. So we want to actually work in a scenario outline. All right. Is this clear up to here, guys? Okay, so now in here we can work both ways. We can actually clean everything, or we can make use of everything in here. So basically, this is our structure, right? So we have a scenario outline, which we need to define a title in here, and we will need an examples table. So this is the structure of this scenario outline. It has each step similar to the scenario, but you will see that in the steps, we have some variables here that are related to the examples we give in here. All right, so how does one of our, let's say one of our data here, what should it look like? So what do we need? If we go back to our test here, we already have our username and password. Right? So what do we need? We need one of these items first. Which item do we want to select? All right. And then once we select these items, once we add these items to cart, we need this data. So basically we need 4 fields. First one is the item. Then we need the first name, last name, and zip code. So the shape of this table for us is going to be this one. So we need an item here. We will need first name, let's put it as a camel case like that. And then we will need the last name. Additionally, we also need, let's say, zip code. Okay, guys? Now, this is the shape of our, so you can always use Ctrl-Shift-F to format. All right, so you don't need to put them in line together yourself. So this is our table now. This is our information. This is the let's say, the data description, right? So we need an item. Oh, let me put it actually in a comment here. It's Ctrl-Shift-F. So even if you have them, like you wrote them differently and they're going to have a very irregular shape, Ctrl-Shift-F should always put them in place for you. All right. Now, after that, so this is your data description. So basically, let's just think back. So what can these data be? First of all, you need here a product name. And let's assume, as in our case, we are selecting, since we did this, we can select this item here. All right, so we select this item. Okay, and we need a first name, and let's say test, and the last name, this is test, very unique first name, last name, and then we need some very unique zip code. And again, you see that our shape changed, so always we can go back to our Ctrl-Shift-F and do the job for us. All right, so now this is how one set of data for a certain scenario will look like for us. Okay, now remember, we are thinking in terms of data first. Why? Because even these steps, we are going to somehow build them in terms of this data. And that's why we first went here and saw, okay, what do we need in order to complete the test in terms of data? Do we need some information about the product? Do we need other cart information and so on? In, let's say, in a real world application, a more real world application, what you would have, you'd have, for example, some product data. You might have, cart is not so easy. You can just put everything like we did, like test or something. Probably you will need some made up card information, made up payment methods and so on. But this is a very simple case for us. because we are not yet concerned with what data is there. We are concerned with learning the way first. All right, guys. So now we have this data, which means that since we have this form, if we need, we can put more items in here and more items below that as well, depending on how many times or how many scenarios we want to test. So this scenario here will run one time for each row. So basically, if you have 5 rows, this runs 5 times. If we have 10 rows, it runs 10 times. All right? So that's why it's data-driven, because every time it's picking up the next data that is available and it's performing the test. Okay? Now, since we have this, we can also add, let's add another item. Since we are here, we can just say we want to add this item as well. Okay, and now we have the cousin of test, which is test2. But they don't live close. They live in completely different zip codes. And we have this information now. All right, which means that if we use this information, we are going to perform 2 runs for our scenario. Okay, guys, up to here? Not going fast or going too fast or? Perfect. Okay, so as you see now, if you see here, it will say that these are just made up steps. So they are not glued to anything. They don't take you anywhere, of course, because we haven't yet worked on them. We have not yet implemented any of them. Now, since we have cleared up whatever we need to go to our starting point of the test, which means to our selection of the items, and we have cleared up what the data are, in this case, now we are just only left with our scenario steps. So what do we want to test? Now we want to call this scenario outline as the order checkout, right? And we are taking for given now that we are already logged in. And once we log in, where do we go? In this main page here. So if we go back, we already have that. We can log in here and we go to the main page here. All right. Now in this main page here, we want to select one item. So basically, given that I'm logged in, and when I click in one item here, so when I click here first, so I want to say here that when I click on item, which item? Here we need to represent each of these items as a variable in this point. So you know how you represent a variable in Java. In here, in feature files, we have a certain way of representing the variables. So basically, if we write the header of the table column here in this form, it means that for each run of this scenario, this item here is going to be represented once by this, and on the next run by this one, and so on if there is any more data. So basically it means that this is a placeholder. It's also known as a placeholder. It holds the place for whatever we give it in the examples. Okay, now we want to select one item here, and we selected one item. After we select one item, we want to click on Add to Cart. All right, so we want to click on this button here. Let's say that, and here when I click on the item, and again, we will put here whatever our step is. So I want to say when I click on the item, and when I click on Add to Cart button, and I click on Add to Cart button. Okay, guys? Now, assuming that we did this step as well, we performed this step. Again, guys, we haven't coded that yet. Everything is not done yet. We are just, basically what we are doing is that if you are building a house, you need some guidelines first, okay? So this is where the kitchen will go, and the kitchen is gonna be this big. Because if you don't do that, then you don't know where to put the kitchen because it's not going to fit probably. So this is planning. So we are planning that, first of all, we are going to click on an item based on what we get. And then we want to click on Add to Cart button, okay? Now, let's go back here. So after we do this, what is our next step? We want to go immediately to cart here. And after we go here to this cart, so basically we want to go to the shopping cart. Let's create another step. Let's keep the then step because we're going to need it. And I click on shopping, let's say shopping cart. Let me write our lowercase. So now we are clicking on the shopping cart. All right. After clicking here on the shopping cart, we're going to see our cart here, and we're going to see everything that we actually clicked on or ordered or we added to the cart. Now we want to click on checkout. All right. So our next step is we click on checkout. So if we click on checkout, so let's put this step on here, and I click on checkout button. Okay, so notice here, guys, that we didn't need any data yet here. We needed first the item that we want to click on. Then these 3 steps, we don't need any data. Why? Because they are not dependent on the item, which means that if we click, so we click this item, but even if we click another item, those steps are going to be the same. That's why we don't need data, because they are not data dependent. Okay, they are not data dependent. Now the checkout information needs data. Why? Because these items might be bought from different people with different name, last name, and zip code. And to do this step now, we need to use let's say we are selecting this item, we need to use the rest of the data given for that item. Okay, so after we click on the checkout button, we are going to need to enter the information. So, and I enter the order information, which is, we need a first name. Now, guys, you have to be careful here. If this, let's say, if that item name or column name supposedly to be is not the same as this here, then these items will not be loaded there. Okay. In fact, you're going to get an error because you're actually telling to Java that there's going to be an item there that is going to, it's a placeholder, but that place is not filled, right? So in a similar manner, we are going to say that this is our first name. All right. We need also our last name, and we need also our zip code. So always, to be sure you are passing the same elements, you can do this way as well. Okay, guys, up to here. So we are entering this information. Again, we are filling some empty blank spaces in there so that whenever we test one row of data, that information is filled with the real test data. And even if you look at our step, once we fill this with our test, then we need to click on continue, right? And then it is our final step in here. So we can, you can always do them both in here, also click on the continue, but the more detailed you guys do it, the more easy it's going to be also to know and to figure out like each step of the test. And even if you want to perform different changes, then you are more flexible to that as well. That's why let's do it separately. So, and I click on continue. All right, so we clicked on continue and we are now in our, let's say, final step. What do we want to do here? We can easily finish, but first of all, we want to make sure that our item is actually on the checkout here. So our last step is to verify. So then I verify here that the item name is, or let's say matches the item. So what are we doing here? We are checking that whether the item that we got here to select in the beginning matches the item found here at the end. Okay, if they don't match, then it means that our test has failed. We are not selecting the items properly. That is our last step. And we could always finish this, but what we want is that we know that we have an implementation here in hooks, right? We have an implementation that in the after, using the after hook, we are actually taking a screenshot. So if we press on this, it's going to take a screenshot of the next screen and not this screen. And we want to see this screen in case we have any troubles, or in case that somebody claims that you didn't do the test right. And let's say your test failed and you have some screenshots in there showing that everything was selected correctly. If you finish, you're just going to take actually that, okay, it's the order is okay. You did the order, but you cannot see the amounts or anything else. So we will not do this last step in our feature file. Okay, guys? Everything understandable up to here? Still, we haven't coded any of these steps. This is just our blueprint of the house. Okay, so these are our plans for the weekend. We are going to do something here, and then after that, we're going to do this, that, and so on. But we haven't taken any actual step yet. Okay, so this is the first part. We already know, we can put also a title on our feature. Okay, we can just say checkout. All right. Now that we have our feature file, we have a feature file of our own. What do we need to do? Now, we are working on a framework, which means that we do some certain stuff in some certain classes. For example, if you see your, let's say, login steps here, you used a login page here, object, right? That's an object. You used this class. Then you used login page again. So what does this mean? You are coding the steps here, and you are doing in that way so that you do not repeat the same codes every time that you do another steps file, steps Java file. So what do? You create these objects once using your base class, your page initializers, common methods here, and also our configuration reader. And then we use these items, which means that for every class now that we will create here, we are going to do the same. And every supplementary information, which means that we need, for example, in here, you don't have any information about some of these pages. You don't have any of these elements in there. All right? But that doesn't mean that you're going to get them when you code the steps. You need to put these into your framework. And where do we put our elements? We have our pages. Now, this is how you can actually think of it. As a user, as a graphical user interface, so we can see where we are going on the page, right? And we know when we are changing to another page. We know when we are clicking something, entering some information. But in Java or in automated testing, you can, using the object-oriented paradigm, you can actually create that website, let's say a website idea, into your Java code, which means that if you have a home page into your web application, you can have a homepage class here that contains everything on it. All right. And when you are using those elements, you conceptually know that you are in that home page. All right. And that's what we used. We used that idea to build our main page here. Okay, and for the main page, we for the first test, we just needed the one element, because you needed to verify are we logged in or not. And also for the login page, for example, you got everything now. If you see, let's say, our login page, let's go back. If you see our login page here, now we as users, we know what everything that this page has. But in order to know it for Java as well, what do? We create an object, let's say, representing this here. We create another object representing this password here, and we have another object representing this button here. And if we have some, let's say, error messages here, we also create an object representing those. So what are we doing? We are converting something that we see, that we know how it is organized, completely the same way into codes. Okay, that is, so why did I explain that in so many steps, is to show you guys that now, as we are moving on, in order, for example, to select one of these items, I should have them as objects, right? So this is our main page. But if you see in our main page, we only have the logo here, but we don't have any of these, which means that we need to modify our main page here to put everything that we need in order to be clicked upon. All right, so if we want to click upon this, then we need to put this web element into our main page. Okay, guys? Now, since we know that, we go to our main page and we can put everything we need in our main page to be initialized, because we are actually using Page Factory to initialize all the elements. All right? Now, on this main page, what do we need else? We are going to, let's say, click on any of these items. I mean, we already know, because we coded this information here, that there are going to be these two items, but we should be prepared for every item that might come. The business requirements change really fast. So let's say they tell you should test this one, and tomorrow they might be like, they wake up on the other side of the bed and they just think, oh, okay, we don't need to test this one. We need to test the other one. That's why automate them and make it compatible with everything. So what we will do is that we will get all these items, no matter which one comes as a requirement, okay? And this is where our Selenium abilities jump in, all right? Now, here, oh, let's not make it full screen. Can you guys see it okay? Like, do I need to zoom in or anything? Nope, it's, if no one's complaining, it should be okay then. Now, what do we want to find? So we can either take these elements one by one. So we can find these elements here. Okay, where is this element? This element, we can grab it like this, right? This is an inventory item here. We have any of those items. You see how they get selected? We can easily get them one by one. But what if we can get the whole list? All right, so what if we can get the whole list? So here we want to be able to get these inventory items, all of them, and then based on which one, let's say which one is required, we can actually click on that. All right, so we can take them by class, which is, if you see, all of them have the same names, the same inventory item here. And if you see the class here, one is the inventory item image, the other is the inventory item label, and so on. They are organized in that way. So what can we do in order to, let's say, make sure that we are grabbing these elements? We can always use our if you click on, even if you don't see this tab there, you can just click Control F and it will show it here. So you need to find those elements, okay? So we want to get these names. If we see here, we want to get these names, all right? So this is what we want to get, that name, this name here, all right? And if you notice, like we clicked on the first one, the class ID is inventory item name. If you click on this one as well, the class ID again is the inventory name. So what can we do? We can use a relative path here, and using that relative path, we can say that let's get the elements that belong to a division here, but they have the class name, let's say the class as, let's say here, what was it? It was inventory. We can actually get it here. Okay, now if you see here, what did we do? We said that it's a relative path and we want all the elements in the page here that belong to a div and share this class name here. All right, and if you see here on the side, you have 6 element graph. So if we navigate through elements, we got all the names, right? We got all the names. Now, what does this say to us? This says that we can get all of these elements here and we can put them into one list of web elements. So we can say here, add and find by, and we are using XPath. Here, okay, let me put that again. Now, and let's make sure everything is correct. Perfect. Now we want to say that we want to store this into a list of web elements. So web element, sorry guys, into a list of web elements, which we will call it as item list. Now, if you see here, this is not important. So if you don't import it, is not yet recognized by Java. Once you import it, then you will have it here. So if you see here 6 items that we have here, it shows to us that whatever we save this in here, it's going to be 6 items in that list. Is that clear, guys? So we are getting all these elements in just one list. Instead, you can always get them, let's say, if you feel comfortable, it would be more tiring, but you can always get them one by one. So you can specify, let's say, just the, let's say this XPath here, and it will give you some XPath showing you only one item, only that item. Okay? Now, what does this mean for us? It means that for now, we are capable on clicking one item here. Okay, we are able of clicking each item that, let's say, the data asks us to do so. The next step for us is, after we click one item, to be able to add it into a cart. Okay, but as you see, we can see it actually. You can always press on it, but once you press on it, you are in a different page here. It's a good practice to put everything into perspective. So now we are inside the inventory item page. And what can we do here? We can say that, okay, since we are in a different page, let's say item page, let's create that page with everything it has inside. So the page, it will follow the same idea completely that we have in our pages here. We just need to define some elements, and we need to use page factory in the constructor so that it can initialize it whenever we need to do so. Okay, so what do we need to put in here in the inventory page? We need to be able to put 2 items, because we are going to click on add to cart, and then we are clicking on shopping cart. Okay, so those are the two items. So the first item, it's this one here. We can find that here, and we can see that that item actually has this text, and there's no item in the page as having this text. So what can we do here? You can easily do this one, always, guys. You can rely on the computer let's say on the inspect element to find you a path, okay? But you can always also do one yourself. So why? This is very easy. For example, you just have one button here like this, and there's the only item having add to cart. So what you can do here, you can define a relative path, and then you can say that I need a button here that fills this condition, that has the text equal to add to cart. So what did you do there? You said that it must be a button here in the first part, and then you said that it needs to have this text on it. Okay, so there's no difference. Like there's no difference, it means that it will work even if you just get the XPath for that. This is just more like you don't spend time getting the XPath, and like even if you put it here, let's say here that we want to, let's say, find by, and we want to find it by, let's say, XPath, and we put it here. Even this here, and let's call this as add btn. Even this here, that's important, what we need, looks better than, let's say, whatever you would put if you just find it by XPath, right? Do you guys agree on that? So if we say here, like, okay, copy the XPath, and let's compare it here, look at that. So it will work. The important thing is if we need to, it will work. There will be situations that you have to rely only on that, okay? Just in case, you should keep that as a backup plan. Now, next, what do we need next on this page? On this page, we just need our shopping cart here. And again, where did it take us? It took us to this point. So this is our shopping cart, all right? So now we can use, actually, we can find the let's say, whenever you find something that you don't like, guys, what I would suggest is that just go up. You mean by up, I mean check the upper rows of this row that it showed. And you can easily reach to an ID, for example, to something that is reliable. What's reliable? ID is very reliable on locating items. So you can say, oh, it has this ID, right? So I can build something based on that ID. I can say that I want a relative path that goes to a div, okay? And it has such an ID. So I'm gonna have to find that again. I don't remember the ID. Let's go ahead and locate that again. So it has, let's say, this ID, shopping cart container, and also it's located in a link. It's a link, okay? So basically, if we put this ID here and we say that after this, there's a link, okay? Let's just make sure we are getting that. Okay. So we are saying that we need an ID here, this ID, and after this ID, you can always move. Remember, I'm sure that you have done these, like, let's say, siblings or parent-child movements, right? So you move from one sibling to another. In this case, we are moving from one parent to the child here. We are going from the div here to the child here. So that's why, like, if we see here, it gives us only one item because only this item here has actually this address. And again, now we can say here that we are finding by XPath, relative XPath, And we will call this as public web element shopping cart. Are we okay up to here, guys? Now we just need to say that we want to initialize this constructor here as inventory item page. And we have no parameters incoming, and we can just do this page factory. We can initialize the elements, and we have a driver and let's say a page. So page is actually this page, and the driver, we can just use this by just saying that we have actually a driver. We can extend our common methods here. If we do that, then we can use this driver, okay? Or we can also extend base class, because again, we know that the driver is actually initialized in base class. If you don't want to do that, you can always say base class.driver, because if you see in this here, and if you go to this driver, this is a static element. That's why you can always refer it this way. Okay, guys, is that clear up to here? Okay, so we have cleared our way more by adding another page. Now that we are here, we can now go to the next page. Now this is our cart, all right? And again, we will have to go through this. That's why we need to create another page. Now I know that in our situation, we are not actually, let's say, putting many elements in one page. But that's because our website, it's let's say easy. Maybe if you think about that, you'll be like, okay, we can put all these elements in one page, and we can still remember each one where it belongs. But if you think again in terms of a more complicated, let's say a web application, you will always find that it's way better than creating each page separately, because you might mix up elements and you don't know now anymore which one belongs to which. So you will see, for example, you had a card there, you have a card here. It's better than knowing each time at which card you are clicking and at which page that is. That's why you need the more formatted your project is, the better it is. That's why we will create another. Now you have another page here, which is the card. Okay, and what do we need here? We just need actually the checkout button. Only this button we need there. All right, so let's go ahead. First, let's create this. And we can say here cart. You can always use a constructor here as well, but we can always do it here by saying that, okay, cart, it's going to be an empty constructor. Okay. We're going to use page factory, and we are using a driver here, and we are using this page. Again, as I said, you can extend the common methods or even the base class. Now we have that. Let's just put one element that we need. The only element that we need here is this checkout here. Now you see that again, we can use a similar idea on how you can locate this. You can always use, let's say, an XPath. You might actually, if you want, you can put it as a practice. If you think that this XPath is somehow good and you like it, it's not complicated, you can always use this as well. Okay, we can use this one, no worries. If you would want how to, like, again, the same, let's say, way is useful to find a relative path, a more understandable path if you want. You can always reach out to the first ID that you see up. You see this ID here, we can use this ID, and then we can say that, okay, after that ID, we find a link, basically an A, that includes this text here, okay? in our case, we can just use this one. I mean, we already fulfilled the mission by showing it once. You can try that as well. Okay. So this is our checkout btn button. Let's import whatever we need and we are good to go. Okay, guys. Now, assuming that, so this ID here, this path, we trusted it to our inspect element, right? So basically what I do personally is that if I find out that I have, let's say, some trouble, let's say something is going wrong, I always check the paths that I did not produce myself. That, let's say, even for example, I hate these ones there. So if I find out that something is wrong and let's say one element is not found, I always suspect, let's say, something that was generated from the tool here, and you can go and double check and maybe even try one relative path that you like. Okay, we are done with the cart as well. Let's move forward. Now, if we need to click on this button that, as we said, and we need to fill these elements. But remember, we are again in another page. So what we will do, we will get these elements and we will put them into the correct page. So in our case, this is checkout step 1 page. So we will go ahead and create a new class here as checkout step 1. Okay, and we can use this first to initialize our constructor there. And this is our driver, and this is our page. We extend our common. Now, what do we need to do here? We need to just get all these elements. We need first name, last name, zip code, and then our continue. Okay, there's no point in using cancel. We are not going to cancel it. So they are straightforward, ID. So we can just use IDs actually to get them. I see first name, they have all lines. So we can just say find by here, okay? And we are going to find them by ID. And this is going to be first name. All right. I will complete that. Usually I like to fill out what I need first. And we have this last name here. And then we have, was it by zip code or postal code? It was postal code. Okay. And we can just say here public web element as, let's say, f name. Let's import whatever we need and we will be good. Public web element again. So this is, it's irrelevant, guys. You can name them whatever you like, but again, it should be something that's understandable, that will help you. Let's say zip code, I'll say. Okay, again, now we have our checkout, but what do we need else? We need also a continue button actually. So let's just find that out as well. Where is our continue button? Does it have an ID? It has a value, which is pretty good, which is good enough. So what can we do? We can go here and again look for an input. Why? Because this is an input class, all right? And on this input, we can use the let's say add value. Why? Because you see the value here is continue, and we can say that whenever that value is equal to continue, then that's what we want. So this is our relative path. again, now we are finding by XPath. And okay, that's gonna work for us. And web element continue btn. Okay, guys, now we have our checkout step 1 as well. So what in our manual test, we can assume that we have filled out this information, because we assume that if we have the elements, we can send text to them. Okay, we continue now. And this is our final step. Okay, so this is where we reach. So I hope you remember our steps. This is our final step. We are verifying that the item is there. So in order to verify, this is the checkout step 2. And in order to verify, we just need this item here, right? We need this element here. And again, we can get it by inventory item name, again, like we used to. Let's say that we can find it this way, where we have a division, a div that says that the class is equal to, I can copy this, I think. Now, this is, in our case, guys, this is like we are getting the inventory name here, and this is only one element, you see. In our case, our test, like each scenario, we are going to select one item, right? That's why in our case, it's safe to say that, okay, with this, we are going to get only one element, all right? Now, why do I mean in our case? Because think of it this way. If we were here, if we were testing, for example, another case where we want to select multiple items, all right? If we want to select multiple items and we come here at our checkout, this is our cart. Let's check out step 1. Anyway, if we come here and again, try to find those items, let's do this by inventory name, you will see that, again, this now takes multiple items. But remember, we are just testing one item. That's why we can use this one. But I'm showing that to just say that be careful when you are testing, for example, because these websites, any website, usually it's coded in some logic. So basically, the same elements usually have the same properties, okay? Because it works in your favor as well. You can get all of them if you want, or if you want, you can just specify one of them. Okay, so we will create another page, which is the checkout step 2. I think it was page. Actually, we didn't put a page in there. We can just leave it like that. Okay, and we can now say that here we can find element by its path. And this is our location of the element, and this element is the item name. All right. And again, we can extend common methods. So in case you are not familiar why we are extending common methods, guys, we are extending common methods because if we see in our common methods, this extends the page initializer. Okay, this page initializer extends the base class. And then this is our driver. This is where the driver is created. That's why it actually does the job. For us, at this point, we can always either also use just page initializer or base class here, and it will work. Okay. Now we can create also our constructor here. And we can initialize the elements, so driver and this page. And now we have, what have we done up to here is that we have coded each page element starting from the main page to the last checkout page. All right, so now we have all these elements. What we need to do now to be sure that they're going to work, we need to make sure that these pages are initialized when we create the driver. So we need to go to our page initializer. You'll see here we have not initialized any of them. So now we can go here and initialize each one of them. So we'll say public static. Let's do them one by one. We can say cart. Here, public static, let's say inventory, item page. Sorry. I'm just gonna put actually inventory. It's better, guys, if we put it that way so that it's more understandable. I mean, remembering it once it's okay. And if you work too much on the project, like you might get to know everything by heart, like what is IIP and so, but like if you are just not working too much on the project, then you should put the best understandable form you can. So we have our checkout, step 1. Let's say checkout step 1, and then we have our public static checkout step 2 out, okay, with lowercase step 2. Let's import those as well. And what's left? We don't have actually anything more, so these, I think these will do it. All of them are, we didn't forget any of them. We already have the main page. Okay, now same way, inside the initialize, we are going to say that cart is equal to new cart. This is shorter. For others, we can just say here that, let's say this is equal to new, let's say inventory item page. Is it okay on that one? Oops. Sorry about that, guys. Oh, wait a minute. Why do I have the card to, I don't have it to public? Of course it's, oh, I didn't have public on the constructor. That's, sorry about that, guys. Okay, so we can initialize the others as well. This is a new checkout step 1 object. And lastly, okay. Lastly, we have our checkout step 2. Now doing this, we have enabled that every item that we have declared is actually going to be initialized by the time that the driver is created, okay? Due to the page initializer here. So it extends the base class and it has access to the driver. So basically everything is initialized by the time we create the driver, which means that when it comes to our steps, we are able to access any of those elements and continue working on them. Are we okay up to here, guys? Let's keep our feature file and let's close the others to the right. Let's close these all. Okay. Now the last, what we have to do now, guys, is only implementation of steps. Now we have gathered, it's like we built the blueprint of the house and we went out and we bought the materials and we have everything now, like even to the nails. We also have the nails. Now what do we have to do? Just start putting the woods together and putting the nails on. So it's very easy to build a house in US. Okay, so how do we do that? We have our runner class that can help us with it. For example, if you I want you guys to remember that this dry run, if it is false, it's going to run the test also with these steps, implementation of the steps. But if this is true, it means that we want to perform a dry run. Even from the meaning, guys, it means that you are doing a run, but it's dry without anything on it. So it means that you are going to test whether your steps are there. And in this case, we know the steps are not there, but we want to run this because this will generate the steps for us. And we want to make sure that this fits into the tags as well. All right, so let's try this one. We can run it there, but we can always, since we are using the Maven Surefire plugin, we are saying that once we run this as a test, it's going actually to build this. So you can always say that, okay, we can also run this as a Maven test. Okay, guys, do you understand why we can run this as a Maven test? Remember that we have a Surefire plugin, which will actually try to, let's say, every time we run the cycles, it's going to run a test with our test runner. They're going to fail both, but we know that, okay? They're going to, why? Because we know that we don't have these methods there. Okay, all of these, there are many, many methods here. Okay. Now we can get all of these and we can go ahead and in our steps here, we can create a new class. So we are going to, let's say, to build our, to build our walls and everything in the house. So this is our check out steps. Okay. Now these are our steps. And we have some errors that we don't like, they are shown because some of the steps are not defined and so on. Now let's just save this. Let's just import everything we need and save it. All right. Now, what do we want to do here as well, guys, is that let's make sure that everything works correctly up to here. User success. Okay, I think I must already have them somewhere in there. Because
methods are duplicated.
Yeah, exactly. Methods are duplicated. Okay, I can just fix that shortly here. And actually, I don't have any other active project, but let me just fix that quickly, guys. I click on Add to Cart. And on the, let's just modify this as on the. On the, I enter the order information as like this, button, that off. And also log, let's say, given that actually, okay, so what am I doing? I'm just modifying these guys so that I can generate them. All right. I want to be able to generate them because they are duplicated in my computer. It means that they need to be redefined. So I'm redefining them here so that I can get those steps as unique steps. Oh, wait a minute. Okay.
You can run it from the test runner. It's better than running from here, I think.
Okay, I actually have just one project, so I didn't know they could interfere with files I have others there. That's why I did not really care about the other files. Okay, so
it's happening because you're doing it from the pom.xml. You can try from test runner. If you try from test runner,
I can try that as well, actually, here.
Right click and do it, run as JUnit test.
Okay, so these steps are, let's test them again here. Okay, so let's test our feature file as well, and it should be able to find them now. Okay, so guys, sorry about that, guys. I don't know what the automation, I must have probably other test runner, or I might need to check that. Now, what we are interested up to here now is that, okay, if we go here, it means that these are actually glued. Okay, it means that whenever this step is to be run, then it will go to the necessary method at this point. All right. Now, in order to implement whatever, like every step as we need to, we will have to extend our common methods. Why? Because everything we have built, every helper class that we have in here, all the page classes and everything, they're going to be initialized, and we need some way to access them. So let's say if we want to log in, actually we will need to, let's say, access the login page elements so that we are able to log in. So here, what do we want to do here? We want to get the...
Sabah, do you want to give a break? To give a 10 minutes break for everyone? I think.
Oh, I thought we were on time. I was trying to finish actually, but if everyone is okay with that, we can give a break, and if everyone has time, we can continue from here. Elian?
Yeah, I think you should give a 10-minute break because it's more than 1 hour. So, and then after 10 minutes, then you can finish it. I don't know, in 15 minutes, as much as you want.
Perfect. Okay, if that works for everyone, that's okay then. Then let's meet up at. So it's 9:18. We can meet up at 9:30 if that works for everyone. Guys? Two minutes? No, it's 12 minutes.
It's 12, not 2 minutes.
Okay. Okay, then let's extra 2, exactly. Okay, then. At 9:30, we can meet at 9:30. Okay, see you guys in a while. Okay, guys, are we back yet? Shall we start? Now, just a clarification. So I noticed we have, when we run using the POM XML, we are running actually this scenario twice. And that's why we had method duplicates, because we copied all the generated methods. And if you notice, like earlier, there were a lot more methods, and it was showing an error because they were method duplicates. All right. So that's what that was the problem that we had. Anyway, so let's go ahead. Now, filling the steps is actually straightforward. So first of all, we need to log in. We already have username and password stored in our properties file, so we can just use our send text methods. We have a send text method in our common methods, and we can use that by providing if you see here, we need actually 2 elements. First of all is the web element where we are sending text, and the other one is the text we are sending. So we have our login, page element, login page object, and we are actually sending a username. So we send to the username, we send the so configs reader get property. So we are getting our property, and the property that we need is the username. And in a similar way, we can also send the password as well. But the property we need is the password. And from the login page, we are accessing that element. So basically the password. And then we just need to click on the login page dot login button. So that is the login. So basically this will be done before every scenario because it's our background step. Now, if you see here, we have, I click on the item with name string. Now this belongs to this step here where we have a variable. So that's why we have this string here. And this string is actually the item name. All right, so we are passing the item name in here in order to be sure that we are clicking on the correct item. Now, how can we make sure of that? Remember that from the main page, we got them as a list. We got all objects as item list. So that's why we need to loop into our items on the list of items that we have and select the correct one. So we can just say that for, let's say, web element, let's say item, which is in item list in our main page, that item list. Yes, the correct list. Now for each item on the item list, we need to check, is this the item that we are actually selecting? Is this the item we are clicking on? So we want to say that if item dot get text, so we want to get the text from the item and compare that to the actual item name that is passed. That equals, sorry guys, that, let me just remove it this way, that equals item name. So we want to make sure that if the item name that we passed on the feature file here is actually the one that we have in there on the list. Now, if that's the case, then we can just click on the item and then we can break out of this loop. Okay, guys? Now, the next step is just click to add to cart button. So we already now have this add to cart button. We have it in our inventory page, right? So basically, if we go, remember that after the main item, let's take these steps. Let's go to actually to our all items. And once we clicked on this, after we select this, then we have this item. So this add to cart button in the inventory item. So what do we need to say here? We already have the inventory item page that we need to click on the add button. All right. Let me just say click here. And once we add this into our, we are actually clicking on the add button, then we are clicking, after this, we need to click on the shopping cart. So these two steps are very similar to each other. We'll just create another click here where we click on inventory item page dot shopping cart. Now we are already in our shopping cart. So we added the item, we are in our shopping cart. So now we are already in our on our cart page, all right? Again, so on this cart page, we just need to click on the checkout here. So again, given that when I click on the, okay, let's use our click method on cart.checkout button. So again, we moved now a step further. So after we click on this checkout, we have our checkout step 1. In here, similar to that, we just need to send some text and then click on the continue. So now as we have all the materials that we need, it's very easy to click on whatever is, let's say, to pass on the next stage. So we have our first name here. This string will be our last name. So remember the order that we passed them, right? And zip code. So this is how we pass them in the feature file. So first name, last name, and zip code. Now, for each one of those, we can just use our sendText method. All right. And we are sending text to our checkout step 1.fName, and we are sending the first name. And in a similar way, guys, we can just send the text. Let me just get this particular method. We are sending actually the L name. Onto the last name, we are sending our last name. And then onto the zip code, we are sending our zip code variable. After that, we just we can click on the checkout step 1.continue button. So now we have passed on the last part, on the, let's say, on the last click. If we are here, let's fill these out with testing, and we continued. So this is where we are now. So now we just need to make an assertion, right? So we need to make an assertion. I mean, let me check. Actually, this one we did it separately in order to divide it with this. So our last step is to make an assertion at this point. So we have our string. What is our string? What does it stand for at this point? It stands for item name, right? So it's our item name again. You can always, if you lose track of that, you can always check in your steps. Now that item name, we need to make an assertion that we want it to be the same as the item name that we have on the second checkout, on the checkout step 2. So same as this item name in there. All right. So we need to say that we need to assert, and we need to make an assertion that in this case we just need to assert 2 strings, right? We need to say assert equals, and then we pass our item name, and we get let's say the text from the item that we have on our card. So basically checkout step 2 dot item name dot get text. So we only need the text. We don't need the whole let's say the whole web element itself. Now let's make sure that we get the JUnit assertion, and that concludes all our field steps, guys. Okay, so in order to be sure and to check them out, we can just go ahead and say that now we are not anymore trying dry run. We also want to run the logic after that, and that's why we need to do that. Okay, so we can also run these from here. Let's run this test runner, and let's see if the test will actually execute correctly or not. So first of all, it will load the browser. It loads it in my main view, so I'll just move it here. Okay, it's a bit fast, guys, but I think, were you able to see, guys? Let me move this one as well. So it will log in, select one item, all right. So now we can also check our screenshots, and the latest one actually, so these should be it. Oh no, these are probably earlier before. So, oh, let me refresh it first, guys. Yeah, order checkout. These are our orders. So one of them, bike light, the other one, fleece jacket, and we can always check. So we have bike light and fleece jacket. passed as elements in there. Is that okay, guys? Any question? Yeah, perfect. So, okay, so that is, what did we use? We used the scenario outline with examples. All right, guys. Now, that is one way. That is the first way that we use to, let's say, do a data-driven testing. Another way, another way on Cucumber to do data-driven testing is using the data tables. Now, the difference between these two methods is that in here, we are doing everything. So every, like the, let's say the tests, the scenarios are actually controlled by our feature file. So the feature file has control, which means that it executes the first data, and then it executes the second data, and so on, if it has any more. So the scenario is that the feature file is responsible of performing the loops in this case, right? But now using data tables, we will just do a very small, we will not do the full step testing. We can just do a small example with that. Okay, guys? So using now data tables, we can just say here, data-driven data table. Now here, again, we declare a scenario. Now, think about that. It's not a scenario outline anymore. It's just one scenario. It means that from the feature file perspective, it will only run once. And let's call this as, let's say, let's print some data table info. Okay, now the difference when it comes to the feature file is that we don't have any more an example set. We provide the information right after our step, the necessary steps that we want. So given that, let's say we are already logged in, we don't need that actually, but just saying that it will always execute that one as well. And we can say that when, let's say, I provide the data table info. And here below this one, we can now immediately, let's say, we can use the same one. Control-Shift-F, and that will fix it. Now, even the difference here, you see, guys, this is not an example anymore. We are providing the data right after this, this step here. Okay? In this case, that step will not have any, it's not glued to anything, but we can provide that data, or even we can just provide the, let's say, without header, the table without header, again, right under this one. So let's put here, let's actually put here a DT. And let's just also see how we can deal with this information as well. Okay, so let's do a dry run with DT so that we can generate that step. Okay. Now let's go ahead and let's put in our checkout step. So we don't need to create another step file for this one. Now it says that given that when I provide the data table info, this is our step method here. Now, if you take a look at it, like it has some actually descriptions just to show that, basically to explain what you can do with that and what that does and so on. But take a look at what it's passed. It's not anymore like a string or any simple stuff. Now it's the data table. Even if you look at this, this is a full path where the data table is from. What you can do, like you can also just, if you remove this one, you can also import this. You see, from the data table of Cucumber, and it will get imported right here. That does it like that because you don't have it imported, and it needs to import it, and it imports it in place. Now, when you have this data, also referring to these comments, there are different ways to deal with these data. Now, what you need to think of is that the feature file is not taking care of the loops anymore. So even if you have all this data, what the feature file is doing is passing all this thing in one step, just dumping it into the Java step method. And now you are responsible for taking care of it. Okay. And the first thing that we can do is that let's just print it, right? We can just print it here, and let's say data table. So the first way, let's say that here the first way is that we can just print it, and let's separate it here. Now, if we print this, it's going to print the exact form that we got it here. Okay. So remember, usually you are not like, we just want to see how that data comes to Java step right now, right? So we are not dealing with the data yet anyhow. But what you will have to think of here is that how are you going to get that data piece by piece to do whatever test you want to do, all right? Now, this is we can see how the data comes. Now, another thing that we can do here is that we can get that data. We can actually get that data as a list of maps. Now, list of maps, how would this be converted into a list of maps? Is that it will create a list containing map, which is item matched with each of the items that we have. And we have first name matched with each of the first names. So basically, the header of the column, the header of the table, each column is going to match with each of the elements. So let's define it here. We can say that a list of map, this is how we can declare it, is a map containing two strings in here. And we can say map list. It's actually, let's say the Selenium itself provides us with, let's say, data table dot. You see as list, as lists, and so on. So if you look at the data type below each of these methods, it can show that how you are going to, let's say, to get that data, how you are going to save that data. And if we say that as maps here, you can see that it returns you a list of maps, key value maps. Okay, so in that case, that's going to be the exact formulation or exact data type that you are going to get. Now let's import the list and maps. Okay. Now we can print this as well. All right, so map list. The third way how we can get this data, is actually just getting that data as a list of strings. What does this do? This actually will return each one of these strings. So it will just sort them out like list, so item, first name, last name, zip, then we continue with the next row and so on. All of it as a list of strings. So if you see here, we can say that data table dot, and you can see as list, and it will return you a list of strings. And then you can always assign this to a list of strings, and you can just say list here. And then we can print this list out as well. Okay, and finally, sorry, this is a 3, I think. And finally, we can always get them as, just a second. So now what do we have else? So if you see here, what's available, you have as lists as well. So what does this do? As lists. Now it's not a list, it's multiple lists. Now as list will return you, if you check that method, it will return you a list of lists. Okay. So now it's not going to take each, let's say, string separately. It's going to take a list of lists. So this is a list. This is another list. This is another list. And all of them, they're going to be put in one list. So basically, an inception of lists, list inside a list. And then we can always say that this is list, having a list inside, and that list has a string inside. Okay, list, let's put it as lists. And let's print that out as well. And let me separate them a bit just so that we have them separated there. Let's just format. Now, if we try to, like, if use our runner and we want to do now not a false, not a true dry run, but we want to run the implementation as well, we can see what that will give us back. Now it's going to run the Chrome driver, of course, because we built it in our base. Right now, even though we are not using it, it's going to run it. So look at the first way. So the first way is giving us the exactly the list as we had it in our feature file, right? The second one, now it's a list of maps. It's a list of maps, which means that it will map each of the columns with one of the values first. You see, this is a map. This is first name test, last name test, zip code is with zip code. Next is another map, which is, again, we have just two maps, right? Here we have two maps. And each of those two maps contains matching of item, first name, last name, and zip, which is our columns, with the values. If we have, let's say, 10 rows, we will have 10 maps now, right? And that is the list of maps. Next here, we have now them as a list. As I said, when we do it as a list, even the columns, even the rows, even the information inside the table, it will be listed here as a string itself. So look, it starts with the first row. After that, it starts with the second row, test, and after that with test2. So basically, it starts with this information up to here, then it starts the second row, and then the third row, so one by one, very naive, okay? And the last one was list of lists, right? And we can see the columns itself make a list, the first row makes a list here, and the second row, which is the first row of the information, the second row of information as well makes a list, all right? So now you see all these four methods have a way of dealing, let's say, grabbing the information from the data table, and then here would be the place the logic here would be the place where we implement the logic, whatever logic we want with these data. So this scenario will be run only once, and in that time that it is run, it will send all the data at once, and it will not run again, so not multiple times. Then when you get the data here, you can do something let's say row by row, depending on what you want to do with the data. Okay, guys? So now, again, like a good practice for you would be like, can you implement the same test that we did in here with, let's say, adding and removing, adding and let's say items and checking out with this data here as well. That would be, so basically we did it step by step here, and the iterations are responsibility of the feature file, but in here the responsibility falls upon you using Java to do those iterations. Okay. That was all, guys, for today. And step reading data. From table and pass the value of that data. Can you explain, Denise, more clear? Like, so I'm doing this step here, and I'm reading the data in Java. So where do you want to pass it?
Yeah. instead of passing the parameters from the step, can you read it from the table as a key and value and get the key and the pass the value?
You mean from here?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, of course, yes. Like now, depending.
Inside the application.
You mean in Java, right?
Yes, yeah. Huh?
Yeah, so what you would do here, for example, I mean, here we just saw like 4 different ways we can get it. But now let's think like you decided to get them as a list of maps, right? Now, what you do, if you, in case you want to print them one by one, for example, you can go ahead and let's say, open these packages. Think of the structures here as packages. So you have a very big, like imagine ordering some very, like even if you order a toothpaste from Amazon, it will put it into 5 packages, okay? That's how you can imagine these structures. Think of it like the bigger package is the list, right? The bigger package here is the list. This list has maps inside. So basically first, if you want to access any of the maps separately, let's say we don't want to print them all. In your case, you just want to access, let's say, this map here, the second map, right? Now, how would you do that is, first of all, you need to open this first package, the list. And how do you open that? You say that I want to loop on the list, right? You can loop on the list. You can say for each, easily you can say for, let's say, map, which is found on map list. And that map, what does that map have to be? What is this type of this map here? It's the exact type that you have inside the list, right? Because this map now, you are inside the list, you are inside the package. Now think of it like inside this big package, you have small packages, okay? In our case, we just have 2 maps, which means we have 2 small packages. Now, that is what we are doing here. We are saying that for each map that we have in there, then do something. You want to print out, let's say, key and value. You can just say map.get using you can use, let's say, you can use a key to get a value. You can just print the map itself, which now if you do this, it will print these 2 maps here, this one, and this one, it will print them separately. Or if you want to do something, let's say, if you just want to get, if you have one of the items, or if you want to check if one item, for example, is actually on this map, if an item was selected. In this loop, you can just try and get, if you can check if the map contains that key or not, for example. I don't know if I answered your question, Denise?
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you.
So basically you need now to go more inside this structure. So what we did here, it's only how do we get this data and how can we save it? Now, all of it depends on what do you want to do from here and below. So if it suits you, you can use it as a map of a list of maps, right? If it suits you, you can use it as a list of lists, depending on what you want to do. And that's why they have provided these methods, because depending on what you want to do, it might be better using a list of lists, or maybe just a list of strings, which is the simplest form. Okay? Guys, any other question? I hope I have not bored you tonight. I mean, I did plan it to take a bit shorter, but since I don't know you guys and I don't know which part you might know, which part you might not know, so I decided to go full on details, and then the time flied. Okay. Okay, guys, thank you. Thank you very much for listening as well, especially being this late. Why we take screenshot even though? So usually screenshot is a procedure. Usually screenshot is a procedure. So for example, by procedure, I mean that it's something that it's a documentation. So you don't only need to code your test so that you can test it for yourself. You are actually testing for the company, right? Even when they...
Böyle de. Zaten daha önce beni çıkarttılardı. Aynen söyle. Beni çıkarttılardı. Eylül'ün 12'sinde, Aralık'ın 12'sinde çıkarttılar beni de.
Hocam bunu da yazmıştım zaten. İlk offer letter'ımı istediklerinde. Beni çıkarttılar. Şimdilik sadece o aralığın sonuna kadar uzattılar.
I mean, was that I didn't understand if that was a question or that was by mistake unmute. But so just one question that I got is why take screenshot even the test pass? So I was clarifying that. Even before doing automation tests, the manual testers, they would do something, they would perform some actions, then take a screenshot and save it into a file. That is in order to have the documentation. Because let's say if you do the tests, the application will go live and something happens, you need to be able to prove that, look, when I tested, this was okay, and there was no problem on this. And the screenshot, for example, is the perfect way. You see, okay, all these items were added. Let's say then you get complaint when it goes live that some item is not being, you cannot put some item into the, let's say, cart, right? So that's the reason why you need screenshot. Yes, I will put I'll push the codes to Git as well. All right, guys, any other question? Thank you very much, guys, for listening. And you can always contact us if you have any question or if correct us if we did any mistake on it or anything, okay? I wish you guys a great night and wish I meet you again, or how I can say it now, because totally virtual, and it would be different in a class, okay? Have a good night, guys. I wish you all the best.